At 7:30 a.m., HOA President Karen is standing at my door with a $50,000 fine notice in her hand. "This is your final warning, James," she's screaming. But what Karen doesn't know is this. The ground she's standing on while reading that fine notice, the only road to her house, is my property. And I'm planning to teach her this truth in a very special way. I'm James Mitchell. I'm 67 years old and a 42-year veteran construction engineer. Throughout my career, I built bridges, roads, water systems. I designed automotive factories for General Motors in Detroit. I built skyscrapers in Chicago. I planned metro systems in Philadelphia. But in 1987, approaching retirement, I was looking for a quiet place. Willowbrook Heights was just 150 acres of empty land back then. But when I looked at that land, I saw a neighborhood. I did all the neighborhood planning myself. I designed where every road would go, how every electrical line would pass, at what depth every water pipe would be installed. Back then, I had countless meetings with landowner Michael Thompson. Michael's vision was grand. It would become Michigan's most prestigious neighborhood. But the problems were mountainous. Permission was needed from city planning for the main road connection. Infrastructure planning was extremely complex. Electricity, water, sewage, gas lines, everything needed to be coordinated. That's when I stepped in. I told Michael, "I can do this job, but we need to be very careful." The most critical point in neighborhood planning was Maple Road. This road was the only connection to the city center, but the geographical location was extremely complex. For the road to pass, it needed to go through 3 different land parcels. The first parcel belonged to the city. The second parcel belonged to Thompson. The third parcel was for sale. I bought that third parcel and built my house there. Why? Because without that parcel, no one could enter the neighborhood. The agreement I made with Michael Thompson was extremely detailed. I would do all the engineering work, road planning, infrastructure design, coordination with the city. In return, I would get a land discount and wouldn't charge my engineering fees. But the most important point was this. For the part of Maple Road passing through my land, I would give right of way, but I wouldn't transfer the title. This was normal practice back then. You give road usage rights, but ownership stays with you. For 3 years between 1988 and 1990, the neighborhood was built. I controlled every phase: road quality, electrical infrastructure, water systems. Everything had to be perfect, because I was going to live there too. When building Maple Road, I paid special attention: quality asphalt, proper drainage system, appropriate width. This road was not only the main access road for neighborhood residents, but also mine. When the neighborhood was completed, we had wonderful neighbors. Retired teacher Margaret Sullivan, former Dr. Robert Hensley, businessman David Park. Everyone was respectful and helpful to each other. There was no HOA. There was no need for one. Everyone took care of their own house and kept the common areas clean. During that period, Willowbrook Heights was truly a peaceful place. Children played in the streets, neighbors invited each other to dinner, summer barbecue parties, winter cooperation in snow removal. There was a real community spirit. Everything changed in 2019. Karen Wellington bought the neighborhood's largest and most expensive house for $850,000. The woman worked in real estate and believed in the power of money. On the first day, she came to my door and introduced herself. "Hello, James, I'm Karen. We're going to make this neighborhood even more beautiful," she said. I later understood the discomfort I felt at that moment. In Karen's eyes were plans to improve everything in our neighborhood. The woman spoke as if the neighborhood belonged to her. Karen's house was truly impressive. 6 bedrooms, 4.5 bathrooms, swimming pool, 3-car garage. It was twice the size of other houses in our neighborhood. Karen seemed to have bought a status along with this house. She began to see herself as the elite in our neighborhood. In her first week, she went from neighbor to neighbor, organizing get-to-know meetings. But the real purpose of these meetings was to identify problems in our neighborhood. Karen's first move was to establish an HOA. To protect our property values, she said. She organized meetings among neighbors. She had no trouble convincing the newly arrived wealthy families. "We need to raise our standards," she propagandized. She made statements like, "Old-style houses are damaging the image of our neighborhood." These old-style houses were, of course, my house. My house built in 1990, solid but modest. According to Karen's standards, I was the biggest problem in our neighborhood. Karen's tactics while establishing the HOA were very insidious. First, she approached new neighbors. There are elements that lower your property values, she said. If we don't take precautions, your investment is at risk. When money was mentioned, new neighbors immediately sided with Karen. Jennifer Williams had bought a house for $450,000 and was afraid of its value declining. David Rothschild wanted to protect his $380,000 investment. Karen used these fears to her advantage. After the HOA was established, Karen declared herself president. She didn't hold an election or anything. "I'm the most experienced person," she said. "I've worked in the real estate sector for 15 years. I know how to protect property values." No one objected because no one wanted to deal with it. Everyone thought it won't harm us anyway. But Karen's plans were much bigger. Karen's first action was to create the Willowbrook Heights Community Standards Manual, a 47-page detailed document. Grass heights had to be minimum 2.5 inches, maximum 3.5 inches. Paint colors had to be chosen from an approved list of 12 colors. Vehicle types had to be 2015 or later models in luxury or sports categories. Trash cans had to be in places invisible from the street. Garden decorations had to be sophisticated. And of course, my house didn't comply with any rule. The first fine came in March 2020. Grass height above limit, $500 fine. My grass was normal height, but Karen had come with a special digital measuring device and said, "Standard is 3.5-inch maximum, yours is 3.7 inches. I was facing a woman who measured grass height with a 0.2-inch difference. Karen's precision was at an obsessive level. The second fine came in April, vehicle parking position violation. My car had been parked in the same place for 30 years, but Karen had made a new rule. Cars must not protrude even 2 inches from the garage line. My 1995 pickup protruded 2.5 inches. Karen had measured this with a measuring tape. $750 fine. The third fine in May. Mailbox appearance non-compliance. My mailbox was also 30 years old in a perfectly normal metal box. But according to Karen's standards, it was aesthetically displeasing and doesn't fit neighborhood character. New standard, wooden posts, specific height, approved designs. $1,000 fine. Karen's inspection system operated with military precision. Twice a week, she walked around my house, professionally looking for violations. She had a digital camera, measuring tools, and detailed checklist in hand. For everything she found, she took time-stamped photos and wrote comprehensive reports. Autumn leaves in my garden, untidy lawn maintenance, $750. Small scratch on garage door, deteriorating exterior appearance. $1,000 paint pattern on the front of the house. Outdated color scheme incompatible with community aesthetic. $1,500. Each fine was bigger than the previous one, and the justifications became increasingly absurd. Karen wasn't just writing fines. She was conducting a systematic propaganda campaign. She told neighbors James is lowering property values in our neighborhood. Because of his house, potential buyers don't like our neighborhood. Real estate agents tell me that James's house negatively affects comparable sales. Some new neighbors began to believe this marketing talk. I was starting to become persona non grata in the neighborhood I had lived in for 30 years. Karen's most sinister tactic was her social isolation strategy. She told new neighbors, James is a problematic person. Avoid association with him. He has legal troubles, compliance issues constantly. Old neighbors like Margaret and Robert still acted loyal, but newcomers began to look at me with suspicious glances. At the grocery store, at the post office, during neighborhood walks. I was getting cold shoulder treatment. In June 2020, Karen's campaign escalated. She organized a community meeting. The James Mitchell problem was put on the table. "This gentleman is not showing cooperation," Karen said. "He's not adapting to our community standards. Perhaps another neighborhood would be more suitable for him." So she was openly trying to get me out of the neighborhood. In July 2020, certified mail came from Karen's lawyer. The total of all my fines had reached $12,000. If payment is not made within 30 days, legal action will be initiated, it said. This was astronomical money for me. I couldn't afford such an amount with my retirement pension. But the real issue wasn't money. The issue was being treated as an unwelcome intruder in the place I had lived for 30 years. Karen's harassment campaign wasn't just targeting me. Veteran neighbors Margaret Sullivan and Robert Hensley also began receiving similar penalties. Margaret's heritage rose. Garden was considered unstructured and unprofessional. Robert's 25-year-old garage door was compromising neighborhood aesthetic. But the most heartbreaking was the citation given to 78-year-old widow Mrs. Patterson. Garden decorations age inappropriate, was said. The garden gnomes she had placed in memory of her deceased husband were found juvenile and undignified. But the newly arrived affluent neighbors enthusiastically supported Karen. Jennifer Williams, David Rothschild, Michael Chang, Sarah Peterson. They applauded Karen's every decision. Finally, someone who maintains standards, they said. The neighborhood had become completely polarized, longtime residents versus Karen's new regime supporters. After that $12,000 legal threat letter arrived, I spent the entire night going through old files in my basement archive room. There were 30 years of engineering career accumulated documents, neighborhood plans, construction permits, property deeds, municipal correspondence, contracts with Thompson. I had meticulously organized and preserved everything, because the most critical principle I learned in my engineering education was the importance of documentation. If it's not documented, it didn't happen, professors used to say. I had conducted my entire professional life with this philosophy. I found the original land purchase agreement from 1987. I found the detailed contract I executed with Michael Thompson. I found the road design plans I submitted to the municipal planning department. And most critically, I found the easement document I granted for Maple Road. While examining that paperwork, I noticed an extremely interesting legal technicality. Right-of-way easement had been granted, but property ownership transfer had not been executed. In legal terminology, this was a very significant distinction. Easement was a temporary permission. Ownership transfer was a permanent conveyance. The next morning, I went early to the county records office to research the current ownership status of Maple Road. Registered clerk Sarah Henderson was a 20-year experienced professional. "Mr. Mitchell, why exactly are you investigating these records?" she inquired. I explained the situation. Sarah conducted a comprehensive search in the computer system, and we discovered the absolutely shocking truth. The road was still officially part of my property deed. It had never been formally transferred on paperwork. Since 1987, everyone had only been utilizing the easement right, but actual ownership had remained with me. "This is a very unusual situation," Sarah said. "Typically, developers transfer road ownership to the municipality, or HOA, upon development completion. But in your case, this step was never completed." I was beginning to comprehend the magnitude of this discovery. The exclusive access road for 47 homes was legally still my private property. Including Karen's house, everyone was utilizing the road with my permission. Sarah conducted additional research and clarified the historical context. In 1987, zoning laws were more flexible. Easement agreements were often drafted as temporary arrangements. Developers typically would complete ownership transfer later, but sometimes, especially in small developments, paperwork remained incomplete. This was exactly our situation. Sarah gave me certified copies of all relevant documents: original easement agreement, current property boundaries, municipal records, everything authenticated with official letterhead. "Mr. Mitchell, these documents are legally binding. If challenged, they would be upheld in court." This confirmation was crucial for me. With that documentation, I went to experienced real estate attorney Tom Bradley's office. Tom had handled countless property disputes in his 40-plus year career. He examined the documents in his office for hours, cross-referenced municipal records, researched legal precedents, reviewed state property laws. Finally, he leaned back in his executive chair and made a profound statement. "James, this road is unequivocally your legal property. If you want, you can declare it private property and restrict access, but we need to be very careful. This would be a major escalation." Tom and I developed a comprehensive strategy. First priority was to completely establish our property rights. Second step was to make our legal position bulletproof. We would update our ownership status in municipal records. Final phase would be conducting strategic negotiation with Karen. But the most critical component of the plan was timing. We would anticipate Karen's next aggressive move, because that action would provide us legal justification. Tom explained the legal ramifications. James, if you officially declare the road private property, residents' legal recourse options are limited. They could claim easement rights, but the ownership documentation is very clear. A court case would be long and expensive, but ultimately would resolve in your favor. I had confidential conversations with longtime neighbors Margaret Sullivan and Robert Hensley. They were also completely frustrated with Karen's authoritarian management. James, if you find a sustainable solution, you have our complete support, Margaret said. Robert was particularly resentful. I practiced medicine for 40 years, served the community. Now, a woman comes and declares that my garden layout is inappropriate. This is absolutely unacceptable behavior. The majority of veteran neighbors were profoundly uncomfortable with Karen's dictatorial governance, but nobody had the courage to openly oppose. Karen's legal intimidation tactics had paralyzed everyone. Fear of expensive legal consequences was preventing collective action. Meanwhile, Karen was systematically intensifying her pressure. She was now patrolling the perimeter of my house twice weekly, conducting comprehensive photographic documentation. I'm compiling evidence, she told neighboring residents. Every fallen leaf in my garden, every architectural detail of my house, every minor imperfection of my car was under microscopic scrutiny. She was conducting surveillance as if I were a criminal suspect. Karen's most disturbing characteristic was perceiving herself as the legitimate owner of the neighborhood. She told recent arrivals, "We are attempting to preserve quality standards here. Certain longtime residents are showing resistance to necessary improvements." She presented herself as the community's savior. This attitude particularly infuriated me, because that neighborhood was the place I had engineered, I had constructed, and I had inhabited for 30 years. Karen was also conducting a subtle campaign against other veteran residents. She suggested to Margaret, "Maybe you should hire garden maintenance service." She told Robert, "It's time to consider garage door replacement." She said to Mrs. Patterson, "Perhaps you could adopt age-appropriate decorating style." Every suggestion carried an underlying threat: comply or face consequences. During the investigation process, the most shocking discovery was the documentation of Karen's systematic pattern. She wasn't making random complaints. She was executing a carefully calculated campaign to displace longtime residents. While using property values protection rhetoric to recent arrivals, she was presenting compliance or departure ultimatums to veteran neighbors. Tom Bradley conducted additional research and analyzed Karen's legal strategy. "James, this woman is conducting a sophisticated operation. She's using systematic harassment to economically force residents to relocate. As expensive fines pile up, people eventually move away from financial pressure. This was a deliberately malicious form of social engineering." On the final day of August 2020, Karen made a dramatic entrance to my door. She had an official-looking thick envelope in her hand and a triumphant expression on her face. "James, this is your absolute final warning," she said with an authoritative tone, placing the envelope on the coffee table. "No more games this time. Either you make payment or we'll see you in the courtroom." When I examined the documentation inside, I was completely stunned. $50,000 comprehensive penalty total. Systematic violations and persistent non-compliance with community standards was written as comprehensive justification. The penalty itemization was 15 pages long. Separate fines had been allocated for every conceivable detail. Lawn height, maintenance violations, $5,000. Exterior paint color non-compliance, $8,000. Vehicle age and type violations, $7,000. Landscaping arrangement deficiencies, $6,000. Mailbox aesthetic nonconformity, $4,000. Refuse container positioning violations, $3,000. Garage door maintenance deficiency, $5,000. Front yard decoration inappropriateness, $4,000. Window treatment visibility issues, $2,000. Backyard organization deficiencies, $3,000. Exterior lighting non-compliance, $2,000. Vehicle washing frequency inadequacy, $1,000. The list was absurdly detailed. Even my house's roof tile color had been cited as deviation from community aesthetic standards. Karen looked extremely confident and self-assured that morning. She had a comprehensive documentation folder in her hand and meticulously explained every single penalty. She presented the justification for each fine in a professional manner, as if she were conducting a legitimate legal proceeding. James, you have exactly 30 days grace period. Either you completely settle this substantial amount, or we'll resolve it in formal legal proceedings. But clearly understand that in this exclusive neighborhood, there is absolutely no appropriate place for standards-compromising individuals like you. Perhaps the appropriate time for serious relocation consideration has finally arrived. These statements profoundly irritated me. I was receiving unwelcome intruder treatment in a place where I had 30 years of established residency history. Karen, I said with a carefully measured tone, you have established residence in this prestigious neighborhood for exactly 2 years. I have continuously inhabited this prime location for 30 comprehensive years. I personally engineered every single aspect of this entire neighborhood. Who exactly are you to suggest permanent departure to me? Karen immediately provided a defensive but assertive response. James, times have fundamentally and significantly changed. We now consistently maintain elevated standards in this upscale neighborhood. Either you completely conform to these mandatory requirements, or you identify a more suitable alternative location. Immediately after Karen's triumphant departure, I made urgent emergency communication to Tom Bradley. Tom, the extended waiting period has officially concluded. The critical time to activate comprehensive implementation strategy has arrived, I said, with an absolutely decisive tone. Tom cautiously and thoughtfully responded, James, are you completely certain and fully committed? This major action will create irreversible consequences for the entire community. If you execute this, unprecedented major disruption will occur in the neighborhood. I was absolutely determined and unwavering. This manipulative woman has systematically transgressed every reasonable boundary. She's making an astronomical demand of $50,000 and aggressively suggesting permanent residence termination to me. The extended patience phase has officially and permanently expired. Tom immediately made a strategic transition to comprehensive action. We completely and thoroughly updated our property documentation. We systematically secured all necessary legal authorizations from municipal authorities. We meticulously established a comprehensive legal framework for formal private property declaration. Most absolutely critically, we carefully developed detailed technical specifications for road closure operation. Every single detail had to be legally bulletproof and challenge-resistant. We couldn't leave any potential legal vulnerability, because Karen's experienced legal representatives would desperately attempt to aggressively exploit every conceivable procedural gap. The road closure major operation required extremely careful planning and precise coordination. Mike Carlson, the experienced owner of Sunrise Construction Company, was my decades-long professional associate. We had maintained a successful collaborative relationship for 20-plus years on challenging projects. I had a comprehensive detailed consultation with Mike. What exactly are the sophisticated infrastructure requirements essential for this sensitive operation? I professionally inquired. Mike immediately developed a comprehensive plan. Heavy-duty commercial metal gate, reinforced concrete barriers, professional warning signage, integrated security camera system, motion detection sensors. I can professionally install a military-grade access control system within 24 hours. Absolutely nobody will be able to achieve unauthorized entry. Before implementing this potentially controversial major action, I needed to properly and thoroughly inform my trusted veteran neighbors. I explained the complete situation to Margaret and Robert with transparency. This is not exclusively personally targeted at Karen, but a principled moral stand against the systematic bullying and intimidation campaign in our neighborhood, I said with sincere conviction. Margaret expressed considerable anxiety and concern. James, this is an extremely radical and unprecedented step. Perhaps alternative diplomatic approaches could be explored to resolve the situation. But Robert provided enthusiastic, unwavering support. James is completely justified and morally correct. Someone needs to give Karen a definitive stop signal. That authoritarian woman has systematically intimidated everybody. Before executing this life-changing major maneuver, serious psychological preparation was also absolutely necessary. I was 67 years old and experienced, and throughout my entire comprehensive lifetime, I had never engaged in serious confrontation. I had always consistently preferred a diplomatic, consensus-building approach in difficult situations. But Karen had systematically and deliberately violated every reasonable boundary. This wasn't exclusively a financial issue. This was a fundamental principle matter and moral integrity question. I absolutely could not tolerate authoritarian intimidation treatment in my own cherished residence, on my own legal property. This was morally unacceptable and legally unjustifiable. I had a comprehensive final strategy review session with Tom. "James," he said with an extremely serious expression, "if you execute this major operation tomorrow morning, seismic upheaval and unprecedented disruption will occur in the entire neighborhood. Karen will completely lose control and experience an emotional breakdown. Other residents will experience shocking surprise and disbelief. It could potentially attract media attention at the regional level. Are you completely prepared for the potential consequences?" I provided an absolutely resolute response. "Tom, no viable alternative option remains against a manipulative woman who makes astronomical demands of $50,000 and aggressively suggests residents' evacuation to me. We're doing decisive implementation tomorrow morning." In the evening, I systematically completed final preparation activities. I comprehensively reviewed legal documentation, organized emergency contact information, established contingency backup plans for various scenarios. I informed Margaret and Robert in detail about the potential disruption and likely consequences. "Starting tomorrow, the entire situation will dramatically change," I said with a serious tone. Karen's emotional reaction could be completely unpredictable. Throughout that lengthy night, I engaged in deep reflection on 30 years of neighborhood history and personal investment. I had literally developed this cherished community from the ground up. I had personally overseen every infrastructure element. I had carefully cultivated every relationship. Karen's attempt at systematic displacement after her brief 2-year residence was absolutely intolerable and morally outrageous. At the critical moment of final decision, moral framework was extremely important. This wasn't a petty revenge operation. This was justice restoration and community protection. Karen had ruthlessly conducted a systematic harassment campaign against vulnerable elderly residents. Margaret, Robert, Mrs. Patterson, all were experiencing severe psychological distress under financial pressure. Someone needed to establish moral accountability. Next morning at sunrise, final preparations would be systematically complete. 30 years of extraordinary patience would officially terminate. Karen Wellington would make a shocking discovery that despite her intimidating appearance, she had made a fundamental strategic mistake. She had initiated direct conflict with an experienced person who controlled the critical infrastructure that provided exclusive access to her own residence. September 1st, 2020, Tuesday morning. The immediate day after Karen delivered that devastating $50,000 ultimatum. At exactly 7 a.m., Tom Bradley made urgent communication. "James, are you completely prepared? We're doing decisive implementation today." I was also completely ready. 30 years of extraordinary patience was officially terminating. Strategic action time had finally arrived. At precisely 9 a.m., we made a professional visit to the Municipal Records Office. Experienced clerk Sarah Henderson was specifically anticipating us. We officially and legally registered our property rights. The critical section of Maple Road passing through my valuable property was now formally private property. All necessary permit documentation was systematically prepared. We had obtained comprehensive approval from the Municipal Planning Department. We had thoroughly informed the police department. Every single procedure was being executed in complete compliance with regulations. At 11 a.m., I had a comprehensive review of the final legal situation with Tom. "James, from this critical point on, absolute return is impossible," he said with a serious professional tone. "Are you completely certain and unwavering?" I was absolutely resolute. Tom, this manipulative woman, imposed an astronomical $50,000 penalty on me and suggested aggressive residence evacuation. No viable alternative option absolutely remains. In the afternoon at exactly 2 p.m., Mike Carlson's experienced construction team made a professional arrival. 3 skilled workers, 1 industrial crane, heavy metal gate materials, reinforced concrete blocks. They positioned precisely at the strategic point where Maple Road intersected with municipal territory. The major operation was officially commencing. Curious neighbors were intensely observing from windows. Exactly what occurrence is happening? Concerned questions were circulating in the atmosphere. The metal gate installation process lasted exactly 2 hours comprehensive duration. Professional-grade steel gate, sophisticated automatic lock system, integrated security cameras, motion sensors, tamper detection. Every detail was being executed absolutely perfectly. Mike's construction team were true experts. Large professional signage was systematically mounted on the gate. Private property, unauthorized access, strictly prohibited. Property owner, James Mitchell, contact information, 5550123. At precisely 4:30 p.m., the skilled workers had successfully completed the operation. The gate was securely closed, and the road was now completely restricted from public access. The first neighbor to experience immediate shock was Jennifer Peterson. When returning from work, she discovered the road was blocked, exited her vehicle, cautiously approached the gate, carefully read the comprehensive signage, and attempted to comprehend the situation. Then she urgently communicated with me asking, "James, what exactly does this mean? Why is the road completely inaccessible?" I professionally responded, "Jennifer, this is now officially private property. Explicit permission is essential for access." At exactly 5:15 p.m., Karen discovered the road completely inaccessible when returning from her regular work commute. She immediately exited her vehicle, made a determined approach to the gate, thoroughly examined the comprehensive signage. Her facial expression was absolutely priceless. Initially complete bewilderment, subsequently intense anger, eventually panic. Every emotional state was clearly visible. She made a desperate attempt to forcefully manipulate the gate, but the gate was structurally secure. She immediately extracted her mobile phone and began frantically communicating with me. "James, what exactly does this mean? What is this gate? Can you completely block this essential road?" Karen's voice was significantly trembling. I professionally responded with an absolutely calm manner. "Karen, this is legally my private property. You've been utilizing my exclusive land for 30 years. You're making an astronomical demand of $50,000 from me. I'm also reasonably requesting a road utilization fee from you." Karen transitioned to hysterical screaming. "This is completely illegal. This absolutely cannot be executed. I'll submit you for comprehensive prosecution in legal court." I continued with a composed manner. "Karen, comprehensive legal documentation is prepared. Have a professional consultation with your experienced attorney. This road is legally and unquestionably my exclusive property. If you want, I can accommodate the gate. But initially, we need to constructively discuss that astronomical $50,000 penalty matter." Karen abruptly terminated the phone and began applying physical force to the gate in a desperate manner. But the gate was structurally robust and didn't demonstrate movement. During evening hours, other neighbors also began systematically returning from their regular work commutes. Margaret Sullivan, Robert Hensley, David Park. Everyone experienced profound surprise when discovering the road was inaccessible. Phone communications became intensely activated. Everyone was making urgent communication with each other. Exactly what occurrence is happening? Why did James completely restrict the road? Is this legal? Such concerned questions were extensively circulating in the atmosphere. There was unprecedented confusion in the neighborhood. At exactly 7 p.m., Margaret Sullivan made a diplomatic visit. "James, we need to systematically resolve this complicated situation. Karen is extremely agitated, but neighbors are also being negatively affected," she said with a concerned tone. I provided a reasonable response. "Margaret, this is fundamentally a simple matter. If Karen requests a sincere apology from me and completely cancels arbitrary penalties, I'll immediately accommodate the gate tomorrow morning. But that astronomical $50,000 issue definitely needs to be resolved. At 8 p.m., Robert Hensley made an amused visit. "James, you've created a major commotion," he said with an obviously delighted tone. "Karen is doing frantic pacing on the exterior of her residence, desperately communicating with legal representatives. She looks extremely panicked." I provided a satisfied response. "Robert, I tolerated this systematic intimidation for 30 years. Sufficient duration has expired." Throughout the evening, intense activity was observable from Karen's residence. Multiple vehicles were making arrivals and departures. Legal consultation sessions were obviously in progress. Other residents of the neighborhood were gradually achieving understanding of the situation's magnitude. This wasn't an ordinary neighbor dispute. This was a fundamental power dynamic shift. Late in the evening, Karen made a desperate attempt to discover an alternative route. She extensively explored the neighborhood perimeter, but Maple Road provided exclusive access. Other potential routes passed through private properties and were equally inaccessible. Reality was slowly comprehending. Her access to her residence was completely dependent on my discretion. Throughout the night, lights in Karen's residence remained continuously active. Legal consultation was obviously continuing for extended duration. Other residents of the neighborhood were also seriously contemplating the situation. This was a precedent-setting event. It was the decisive moment of the longtime residents versus recent arrivals' power struggle. The next day at exactly 9 a.m., Karen's legal team arrived. 3 experienced attorneys, Michael Stevens, Patricia Woods, and David Chen. They looked extremely serious with multiple briefcases, but Tom Bradley was also completely prepared with comprehensive documentation. We would conduct a formal meeting at the neighborhood gate. Karen also attended but looked dramatically different. Her confident demeanor was completely absent, eyes fatigued, hair disheveled. She had obviously experienced sleep deprivation throughout the night. Her hands were visibly trembling. Karen's senior attorney, Michael Stevens, began with an arrogant approach. "Mr. Mitchell, this road closure is legally invalid. Easement rights cannot be canceled. 47 families live here, and all have transit rights. Your action constitutes blackmail." Stevens's tone was extremely harsh and threatening. Tom Bradley responded calmly, "Mr. Stevens, let's examine the legal circumstances." Tom placed 1,987 documentation on the table. Original property deed, easement agreement, municipal records. Everything was systematically organized. These documents clearly demonstrate Mr. Mitchell's unquestionable ownership rights to Maple Road. Stevens examined the documentation with initial dismissiveness, but as he read the legal papers, his expression dramatically transformed. After 15 minutes of examination, Stevens acknowledged with shock, "This is completely authentic. The road is unquestionably Mr. Mitchell's legal property. Easement rights were granted, but ownership was never transferred." Karen's face dramatically paled. For the first time, she completely comprehended the truth, the shocking realization of transiting through someone else's property for 30 years. From that moment, the power dynamics completely reversed. Stevens's aggressive tone significantly softened. "Mr. Mitchell, how can we resolve this situation? The neighborhood's 47 residences are completely dependent on this road." I provided a measured response. A straightforward solution exists. First, all penalties Karen imposed on me will be nullified. Second, Karen will not take future punitive actions against me. Third, Karen will provide a public apology to me and other veteran neighbors. If these conditions are accepted, I will permanently grant road utilization rights. Karen attempted resistance. "This is unfair! I was preserving neighborhood standards. The $50,000 penalty was justified." But Stevens silenced her. "Mrs. Wellington, our legal position is unfavorable. Mr. Mitchell's terms appear reasonable." I continued calmly. "Karen, I've lived peacefully in this neighborhood for 30 years. I engineered and built this community. You've been here 2 years and suggest I relocate. Who has superior knowledge of neighborhood standards?" Stevens comprehended the gravity and pressured Karen. "Mrs. Wellington, we must accept this settlement. Legal alternatives will produce worse outcomes." After 20 minutes of private discussion with her attorneys, Karen's expression was defeated but resigned. "Mr. Mitchell, Stevens said professionally. Mrs. Wellington accepts the proposed conditions. At exactly 3 p.m., the legal agreement was executed. Karen canceled all my penalties. The $50,000 invoice was destroyed. She provided written guarantee against future harassment and apologized to all veteran neighbors. In return, I granted permanent road utilization rights. The agreement was officially registered. At 4 p.m., I had the gate opened. The road was accessible to traffic, but now everyone knew the reality. This road was James Mitchell's property, and he graciously allowed residents' use. Karen's authoritative dominance was permanently undermined. Other veterans found courage to oppose her arbitrary decisions. In HOA meetings, Karen's proposals began being consistently rejected. Today, 3 years later, I still live peacefully in Willowbrook Heights. Karen is also still here, but now we have mutual respect. She acknowledged my property rights. I understood her certain neighborhood concerns. Every morning when she uses that road, she respectfully acknowledges my residence. Because she never forgets that, to access her own home, she uses my exclusive property. The most critical lesson from my 30-year engineering career: always preserve documentation and understand legal rights, because powerful-appearing individuals typically don't recognize their fundamental vulnerabilities. Karen, while attempting my displacement, didn't realize she was conflicting with the person who controlled access to her own home. Sometimes the most significant power is concealed in assets you quietly possess. This narrative demonstrates that no authoritarian individual has authority to make you feel unwelcome in your own home. But the story doesn't end with our settlement. The events that unfolded over the following months proved that sometimes the most profound changes happen slowly, quietly, and in ways you never expect. 3 weeks after the gate incident, I noticed Karen's behavior had changed dramatically. Gone were the daily inspection rounds with her measuring tape and camera. Her confident stride had been replaced by a more hesitant walk. When she encountered me during my evening strolls, she would nod politely and say, "Good evening, James," a far cry from her former imperious commands about my violations. The first real sign of change came in October 2020. I was raking leaves in my front yard when Karen approached me. She stood at the edge of my property for a moment, as if gathering courage. "James," she said quietly, "I wanted to ask you something. Would you be willing to tell me about the neighborhood's history? I realize I never learned about how this place came to be." I was surprised by her genuine tone. Setting down my rake, I spent the next hour explaining how I had engineered the drainage systems, planned the electrical grid, and designed the road layout to maximize both functionality and beauty. Karen listened intently, asking thoughtful questions about the technical challenges I had faced. "I had no idea," she said when I finished. "I thought this was just another suburban development. I didn't realize it was, well, your life's work." There was something different in her voice, humility, perhaps even respect. Over the following weeks, other neighbors began reporting similar interactions with Karen. She approached Margaret Sullivan to learn about the neighborhood's social history. She asked Robert Hensley about his medical practice and how he had chosen to retire here. She even visited Mrs. Patterson and genuinely admired the garden gnomes, asking about their significance. The transformation became more apparent during the November HOA meeting. For the first time since establishing herself as president, Karen opened the floor for general discussion before addressing her agenda. "I want to hear what everyone thinks about our community standards," she said. "I may have been overly focused on certain details without considering the bigger picture." Margaret Sullivan spoke first. "Karen, I think the most important standard we can have is treating each other with kindness and respect. My rose garden may not be perfectly manicured, but it brings me joy. Isn't that worth something?" Robert Hensley added, "I've lived in many places, and what made this neighborhood special was never the paint colors or grass height. It was the sense that neighbors looked out for each other." Karen listened to each comment without interrupting, taking notes, not for violations, but seemingly to understand different perspectives. When it was time for her to speak, she surprised everyone. "I owe all of you an apology," she began. "I came here wanting to protect property values, but I lost sight of what actually makes a place valuable: the people who live here and the community we build together. I've been so focused on enforcing rules that I forgot why neighborhoods exist in the first place." She paused, looking directly at me. James, I especially owe you an apology. You built this place with your own hands and vision. Instead of learning from your experience, I tried to impose my own ideas without understanding what I was changing. That was wrong. The room was silent. Some of the newer residents who had supported Karen's aggressive policies looked uncomfortable, realizing they too had been part of the problem. But Karen wasn't finished. I'm proposing we revise our community standards manual. Instead of focusing on specific measurements and violations, let's create guidelines that encourage pride in our homes while respecting individual expression and circumstances. Over the following months, Karen worked with veteran neighbors to completely rewrite the HOA rules. The new manual was only 8 pages long, a dramatic reduction from the original 47-page document. It emphasized principles rather than precise measurements. Maintain your property in a way that shows pride in your home and respect for your neighbors. The fine system was restructured too. Instead of automatic penalties, the new approach involved friendly conversations and offers of assistance. If someone's lawn looked neglected, neighbors would ask if they needed help rather than issuing citations. Karen's personal transformation was perhaps the most remarkable aspect of the entire experience. She began organizing community events, not to enforce compliance, but to build relationships. She started a neighborhood book club, coordinated a group bulk buying program for landscaping supplies, and even organized volunteers to help elderly residents with yard work. When spring arrived in 2021, Karen approached me with an unusual request. James, I've been thinking about your engineering background. We have drainage issues on the east side of the neighborhood during heavy rains. Instead of hiring an outside consultant, would you be willing to take a look? I'd be happy to pay your consulting fee. This was a complete reversal from the woman who had once tried to fine me for having grass that was 0.2 inches too tall. I agreed to examine the drainage problem, and we spent several afternoons walking the affected areas, discussing potential solutions. Karen proved to be an attentive student, asking intelligent questions and taking detailed notes. You know, she said during one of these consultations, I wish I had approached you this way from the beginning. I could have learned so much instead of creating so much conflict. The drainage project became a symbol of our neighborhood's new dynamic. Instead of top-down mandates, it was a collaborative effort. Affected residents contributed to the cost, neighbors volunteered labor, and Karen coordinated the project with the same efficiency she had once applied to finding violations, but now in service of solving actual problems. By summer 2021, visitors to our neighborhood often commented on the remarkable sense of community they observed. Children played freely in the streets again, neighbors chatted over fences, and the evening walks had resumed their social character rather than feeling like patrol inspections. Karen had become an entirely different type of leader, one who facilitated rather than commanded, who sought to understand rather than judge, and who used her organizational skills to bring people together rather than drive them apart. The most telling moment came during our annual neighborhood barbecue in August 2021. As we all gathered in the community park area, Karen approached me with a photo she had printed. It was an image from the local newspaper's coverage of our road closure incident, showing her standing angrily at my gate. I keep this on my desk, she said with a self-deprecating smile. It reminds me of the person I never want to be again. That woman in the picture thought power came from control and fear. I learned that real leadership comes from service and respect. She paused, looking around at the gathering, children playing, neighbors laughing, the peaceful community atmosphere that had been restored. Thank you for teaching me that lesson, James. I know it wasn't easy, and I know I didn't make it easy for you, but you showed me that sometimes the kindest thing you can do for someone is to set firm boundaries when they've lost their way. If you've experienced a similar HOA nightmare, share your story in the comments. Your experience might help another viewer fight back against systematic harassment. These stories provide practical education for real situations. Hit that subscribe button and ring the notification bell because we're building a community of people who refuse to be intimidated by petty tyrants with clipboards. Every day we bring you compelling stories, proving ordinary citizens can defend their rights in extraordinary circumstances. Tomorrow's story. A small town mayor tries to shut down a veteran's food truck business until discovering the veteran has direct access to the state governor. The mayor's career ends, and the veteran's business thrives. Remember, Bullies only appear powerful until they encounter resistance. Document everything, know your rights, and take action when necessary. Justice requires patience, but truth ultimately prevails. Be here tomorrow for another incredible story of justice served. Until then, stay strong and remember, sometimes the most powerful people are actually in the most vulnerable positions. They just don't realize it yet.